Um, Good morning and welcome to Details webinar tagged Great Expectations, Workplace and Wealth. So for those of you who have read the book by Charles Dickens wrote a book called Great Expectations, and there was a major character in that book called Pip. And Pip is someone who went through a lot of issues in life and came out stronger at the other end. Pip has two major stories in that book. How he met a man who was chained in the woods and looking tattered and ragged, and it was a very frightening moment for him. But Pip plucked up the courage, found food, stole food for the man, unchained him, and it turned out later that this man was an extremely rich person and left him a fortune. Pip also met a lady called Estella, who he fell in love with. But Estella was not enamored with Pip because Pip was not so refined and not so educated. And that spurred Pip on to start educating himself, reading books, going to school to learn how to become a refined gentleman. And this is why we tag these Great Expectations, because we think that in the midst of everything going on, there would be a lot of Pips out there who would take advantage of the situation. And we think that, in line with the saying that, optimists always find opportunities in a calamity, while pessimists always find calamities in an opportunity. We think that, we want to have a conversation on the optimistic side to see where we can find opportunities despite what is going on, the pandemics, the oil prices, whatever. So this is just an opportunities discussion, and I welcome you all, and I ask you to enjoy the discussion. There will be time to ask questions, and to help us stoke the fire as we discuss this. We have a few people on board. First and foremost, we have Odu Onadike, who is the COO of Detail Commercial Solicitors. Odu is a HR practitioner. She founded a Girls Guide Club for teenage girls. She's an ex-banker. She used to work in a bank for 8 years. We have here also my good friend, Oke Oyebule, who's an investment banker, CEO of Gulf Africa Capital. Oke studied electrical engineering and then veered into investment banking in New York after he did his MBA. And he's one of those intelligent people, and friends call him Prof. And his interests are boxing and gentleman's classic tailoring. And then we have another good friend of ours, William Breeze. Today I'll just call him Will because that's what everybody calls him. He's a partner with Herbert Smith and Freehills. William speaks Italian, but we'll ask him not to speak Italian today. He's a great lawyer. A commentator says he's impressive, outstanding, and experienced. He studied modern history at Oxford University, but we'll tell him not to be a historian today because we have only 1 hour. We have 2 other people who may join us, so I will introduce them just in case they eventually do. Martin Kavanagh is Will's partner at Herbert Smith and Freehills. Martin leads the Energy and Natural Resources Department of Herbert Smith. Then we have a lady called Ada Osakwe. Ada is the CEO of AgroLay. She's what you call an agropreneur. She's also the founder of Newly Juice. Newly Juice makes healthy juices and retails it all across Nigeria. She's proficient in French, but we'll be speaking in English today. Interestingly, Ada was named as Forbes Top 20 Power Women in December 2014. So that's it for the panelists, and I will give each of them an opportunity just to say hello before we start the session, just to make sure we can hear their voices. Beginning with you, okay?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I knew you were going to do this. I was just hoping Will would go first. But here we are. Okay, Onyemule here. I'm calling in from Abu Dhabi. Ayuli and I go way back. He was my lawyer and in many ways my savior from myself during my time in Africa. And so I've worked extensively with him on all sorts of projects, project finance, oil and gas deals, mostly on the commercial side. As you know, they don't do much litigation, but he's also sort of looked after me in that regard. So that's it. Very short introduction. I have an electrical engineering background. And an MBA in banking and finance, started out at JP Morgan in the oil and gas M&A group, and then rotated to Citigroup, what is now Citigroup, doing media and telecoms and oil and gas as well. Went to the buy side, did some time at BlackRock, and since then have been between sort of private equity, did some ALM treasury work at Citi as well, and that's it. And here I am in Abu Dhabi, and I advise sovereign wealth funds on investment opportunities and projects.
Thanks. Okay. Will, say hello. Let's be sure we can hear your voice.
Thanks very much, Ayuli. Thanks. All as promised, I'm not speaking Italian, and as promised, I won't speak about matters historical unless they really do pertain to what we're covering. Ayuli's introduction has been very kind and very generous. It's as ever a pleasure to be working with the detailed team and with new friends on the call now. And of course, it's a good example of how modern communications technology is allowing us to do something that we probably didn't do so much of before. I'm sure that we'll all touch on that in the course of today's session. Anyway, I know there's much to cover, so I'll be quiet for now, but very much looking forward to this. Thank you.
Audrey, are you there?
Yes, I am. I am here. It's good to be here. My name is Odunola Onodipe. I'm the lead operating officer for Detail, and I basically cover business operations for the firm.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's start.
Can you hear me? I've been on, yes, but for some reason the camera is not showing, but I'll just continue with the conversation. It's great to be here. Thank you for having this conversation. My name is Ada Osakwe. Yes, great. I'm Ada Osakwe. As you said, I'm the CEO of Agrolay Ventures. Yes, I'm the CEO of Agrolay Ventures and a company called Newly Juice. We focus on farm-to-table food. We have a chain of 10 restaurants. Unfortunately, it's currently one in the COVID environment. And I have a background in finance, private equity, development finance, and really passionate about ensuring that Africa moves forward. So in a time right now that everyone's talking about the doom and gloom, I'm really glad to be having this conversation to look out for the silver lining.
Thank you, Ada. Why is Ada's photograph not showing? I think someone needs to knock themselves up. I can see you, Lolade, I shouldn't be seeing you. Same for you, Chukuni. So maybe someone needs to knock themselves up off. I'll find out why her camera isn't showing, but see what you can do about that. Anyway, so it's good to have you, Ada, and thank you so much. So let's start with you, okay? You know, Nigeria isn't looking too good right now. I mean, if you follow what Bloomberg and the Economist says, the ratings, the oil prices, the debt crisis, but I've lived in this country all my life, and I think there's always been a silver lining, right? So tell us what you think. Are there any silver linings?
Well, look, I mean, Nigeria is not alone. It just happens to be one of those countries exposed to, on the front lines of the exposure of the current global economic crisis. So are all other commodity exporters. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, if you're highly dependent on a single source of revenue for your, US dollar income, then of course you're going to get carried, with the storm. So I wouldn't sort of single Nigeria out as sort of a problem child here. It just happens to be collateral damage from sort of what's going on around the world. Now, I think, again, it comes down to, the source of the problem is oil, right? Or over-dependence on oil. And we've known this for decades, right? We just didn't discover this last night. And there's been a lot of talk about diversification and getting away from oil as sort of a sole source of the fixed income for the country. And what I hope is that this is a wake-up call. I don't think we've ever had it this severe from a shock standpoint. And it's probably going to get a bit worse before it gets better. And my hope is that coming out of this shock, which I think will shock everyone, that people would get a bit more proactive about diversifying the revenue source.
Now let's talk a bit about that. So diversifying the revenue source. I mean, if you were to take the decision, where do you think this will take us? And what will be the specific opportunities for entrepreneurs? What will be the new sectors that will, kind of compete with oil?
Well, look, let's not kid ourselves, right? Every country or nation that has become an emerged or sort of emerged from developing status into developed status has gone through a phase of industrialization. Now, whether that's an option for Nigeria and indeed all of Africa at this point is in question, because here we have a lowest cost producer in China, right, and the Far East. And given the specific challenges we have, starting from infrastructure to cost of capital and so on and so forth, I think there are questions because labor is just one input. So we might have cheap labor, but there's just a lot of other things, variables that go into sort of the production equation. So whether we should be targeting sort of being the shop floor of the world, I don't know that that's a sensible or even a realistic ambition. What I will say is that you have to look at what you have. And what we have is arable land, lots of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
agriculture.
This is where we started, right?
Let me stop you there, okay, and move to Ada. Ada, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
So we've come into your territory. This is agriculture.
Yes.
So
as Oke says, we're basically taking away from the oil money he's been making, and now me in agriculture, I have to So, but honestly, I really
have to look for clients in agriculture now. We have to look for clients in agriculture, not oil and gas.
Absolutely, but
so what do you think will happen in the agriculture space over the next 3, 4, 5 years?
I think this is really our time. I've been saying this for the last few, 5, 6 years since the time I worked in government and I got the agriculture bug. I wasn't always doing this. I was in power, private equity, infrastructure, and then I moved to agriculture because I couldn't understand how Africa was spending over 40 billion naira importing food that we could otherwise produce locally. And I know there's a lot of lip service to the fact that, we're going to diversify our economy. This new government, when they came in, they said that. But you're now at a situation that, looking at the situation that the shit has hit the fan, excuse my language, but we have to look at these homegrown solutions right now. We have to look inwards at self-sufficiency. There's no more importing from China for specific goods, toothpicks or whatever that we weren't even producing locally. There's no more of that. Everywhere is closed. And even if it wasn't closed, everyone's thinking about their own interests, their own national interests, and not thinking about Nigeria or the rest of Africa. So it's a wake-up call. And hopefully, I feel it's a wake-up call that's here to stay. And that's where I really see the opportunities. Agriculture would always be a way that, the fact that even though my sales are down over 80%, the fact that we could still earn something because food is an essential service. That's a defensive sector right there. So I just believe that agriculture will continue to thrive, but this is the time that we truly have to look at not just about Nigerians producing mangoes or producing tomatoes or producing whatever that just stays there to rot and there are no markets. Let's industrialize and keep the value within Africa. We can't continue importing corn or whatever because for the huge market and the opportunity, because the beauty is that we have a market. We have such a huge market that would buy and make money for anyone. So I do think that finally, I hope this is the time for agriculture and the opportunities are ripe.
Excellent. And you're also in the retail space, right? Do you think that at this time there will be some market for people who are into home deliveries? I mean, if you look at the statistics, across the world, companies that are into home deliveries seem to be doing very well at this time. What do you think? Hello, Adam. So I think we've lost her. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me, Will?
Yes, I can.
Okay, are you still there?
I can hear you perfectly.
Absolutely. The touchless or contactless societies we were at. And I think even when there's a vaccine or whatever, we would... Oh, wow. It was a big delay.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So there's clearly an opportunity for people to improve connectivity and ways of people to communicate. I don't think the Zooms and all the other technology have really gotten this 100%. Okay. Let's move to Odu. Odu, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. Well-being is going to be a major issue in this period. I mean, I think, with this lockdown, a lot of people have gone slightly crazier than the world was previously. And then, with the changes in the workplace and the fear and everything, as a HR person, I mean, what do you think is going to happen to the well-being sector?
Right. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. In my opinion, I think that there will be much more focus on well-being, on wellness, generally speaking. Safety, physical health, and mental resilience will be at the forefront. So admittedly, organizations will now need to build programs around managing employee well-being. With more people working from home, I see us putting together systems or support programs around managing employee well-being, generally speaking. So with the new normal of more flexi time, people working from home, organizations will also need to work also on team connectedness, because that also goes, it tells a lot about the well-being of an employee. So usually when people take time off work or they engage in flexi work programs, so people choose days that they can come to work as opposed to coming to work 9 to 5 every day of the week. when people stay back at home, there is need for them to reconnect when they come back. So with well-being at the forefront, organizations, most importantly HR, will focus more on programs that will support the mental health and the general healthcare of employees. I mean, the upside to this is that organizations that leverage an employee wellness program will see much more engagement even from their staff. That's how I see this playing out. Much more focus on well-being.
Thanks, Adu. I mean, one of the key questions I've asked myself in this period is, for organizations who used to do Friday TGIFs, who are now working remotely or may need to work remotely for months to come, how are they going to do the TGIFs? What are the ways to do TGIF on Zoom, or I haven't been able to come up with an answer. How are we going to high five and backslap and clean glasses? How's that going to happen? I mean, is there someone going to develop a live environment where we can party without being together?
Well, I mean, that's what it's going to look like. For example, I attended a Zoom birthday party. So it was a friend's birthday, and then everybody called in on Zoom, and we all had drinks and we had food. So I think pretty much we will see organizations coming up creatively with ideas like this. You can have team activities, you can have fun, throwing gifts at one another. So yes, there will probably be new virtual parties.
Thanks, Anu. Will, let's come to you. I mean, you are based in the UK. And there is this strong connect between the UK and Nigeria. People are flying in, either way. Okay, for many things, education, tourism, and football, which I always complain that watching. The teams in the UK league, and they're making a lot of money because they have viewers from Nigeria, and we don't share in any of that wealth. Anyway, that's beside the point. How do you see the UK reacting, to what's going on right now, and what do you think is going to happen that will throw up some opportunities for us?
I mean, I think that setting aside the political and governmental challenges the UK has been facing, I do think there are a lot of opportunities that are going to pop up. The pharma sector is clearly something that's going to boom, and not just in looking for a vaccine for COVID-19, but more generally. And I think that'll feed through to a wider, much deeper, stronger focus on healthcare. So looking at hospitals, looking at care homes, looking at personal protective equipment across the board, that's going to be very important. Wellbeing and nutrition, of course, and Ada, I think, is going to be even busier than usual as people realise the importance of looking after themselves. Challenges-wise, notwithstanding the benefit of having this sort of interaction and Zoom birthday parties, for example, and group drinks and team quizzes and things like that, nothing beats meeting people in person. And so I think the sooner that we can all get back on the road and get back onto aircraft and meet up in person, the better. That level of interaction is going to make a real difference. But overall, I am optimistic. I mean, the world is going to continue to move forward. And yes, there's a huge challenge right now, but we are all, and our clients and friends and everyone we know, everyone's looking for ways to make things better, to find solutions to problems, to push things forward. And so although there might be temporary bumps in the road, I think the path ahead is a promising one.
Thanks, Will. I like what you said. Nothing beats meeting people in person. We should really, we should inscribe that somewhere and put your name after it. Nothing beats meeting people in person. Now, on that note, Judy, put up a video of the suits being developed for clubbing. The picture. Julie, are you there? Okay. Lost in transmission. Chukwudi, okay, we'll come back to it. Oh, he's putting it up. Okay, great. So I found this on Twitter, you know, just in. California design firm working on protective suit for concerts and clubbing. The suit is designed for partying and safety. It includes an N95 filter, as well as a snap-in canisters for drinking and vaping. So, so I mean, people are thinking, right? People are listening to Will, that nothing beats meeting people in person, right? And if we're going to still go clubbing and meet people in person, some people want to do so feeling safe. They want to have masks covering themselves, and they want to have this, you know, little space to put in their straw and vape and still have a drink. So, I mean, this, for me, this just tells you where the world is going to. I mean, we're going to see who the thinkers are over the next couple of months and years to come. Okay, Chidi, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so okay, let's come back to you. Let's come back to you. I mean, you can't talk these days. You can't talk about the world without talking about China. Everything you talk about begins and ends in China, including Wuhan and the virus, and so they've been through hell and high waters, you know, even with the Western world and everything. What do you think China will be doing? What are they thinking? Where do you think the opportunities will lie? For example, I know that the emerging markets owe China more money than all the other countries put together, and those debts are tied to infrastructure and all that, right? So China has its paws on everything in almost every country. Now, so what do you think? I mean, how will China play, and what do you think will come out of it?
Well, look, I made a few notes on China, and I mean, we could talk about China from here till the cows come home. But I mean, there are a few things that jump to mind. One is, China remains inextricably linked to the U.S., whether it likes it or not. It's a largely export-dependent economy. Most of its GDP is still tied to export, despite all attempts to stimulate the middle class and basically stimulate sort of local consumption to take that up. But it's still largely export-dependent. Massive current. Sorry if I'm speaking a lot of economics here, but I'll try to sort of break it down. But massive current account balances being recycled into dollars through treasury purchases. So it's stuck. China is stuck in this sort of, it's like a hamster on a wheel, right? For it to keep breathing, it needs to keep selling product into the US, right? And it needs to figure out how to break that cycle. And my thinking is that this new Belt and Road Initiative, it's probably its only way out of that cycle. Why? Because what China is trying to do with the Belt and Road Initiative is to essentially to export a model which has already sort of, in a sense, proven itself in China. China basically lifted hundreds of millions of people out of the farms, out of poverty into the middle class through these massive infrastructure projects, right? So they've done it on a small scale, and I think what they want to do with this BRI is to basically export that model and sort of, essentially do it in Europe, in Africa, along the seaways, and so on and so on and so forth. Obviously, the US is not having it, and sort of you're seeing sort of all the back and forth. So to sum it up, I think that China needs a solution. It cannot keep growing at 7, 8, 9% anymore. based on the old model of exporting to the US and the EU and sort of developed countries. So I think China is at a crossroads, and it needs to figure out how to sort of make that transition, either from a pure export economy to a consumption economy, which is not there yet because they don't have the numbers locally to replace that consumption with export. So it has to be major infrastructure projects which will sort of spur bank lending, construction, manufacturing, and all of that stuff, surplus capacity and export. So that's my view on China.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? I hope I didn't sound too much like an economic.
No. Ada, are you still on? Is Ada on? Have we lost Ada? Okay, I think we've lost her. But what I hear you say, okay, is, I mean, if I summarize it from an opportunity standpoint, right? China is export driven, and China exports to the US, exports to emerging markets, including Nigeria. A lot of things coming into Nigeria from China.
Correct.
If what is going on is going to reduce China's ability to export, then it will also create new markets in countries where China previously exported to, because then it creates probably new manufacturers. So there would be probably new manufacturers coming on board in Nigeria trying to substitute the products that would otherwise have come in from China. Will, what do you think about this?
I think one of the things we're going to see coming out of the whole crisis is a sort of a reshoring, if you will, of production. In other words, less reliance on complicated international supply chains and a much greater focus on being able to produce products nearer where they're consumed. Now, of course, we'll still see international supply chains, don't get me wrong on that front, but I think personal protective equipment is a good example where there hasn't been enough supply in any country, frankly. And there's been lots of talk about deliveries being hijacked along the way. So sort of in Middle Eastern airports, you see America reportedly commandeering aircraft loads of face masks, I've read in the press. So I think that's a good example of where we'll see production coming back home, if you will. And I think that China will be probably suffer from that. On the flip side of things, Chinese consumption itself will pick up. There'll be, I think, a greater focus on the here and now, on particularly the rising young generation who've got disposable income and who realise that life is for living. And instead of at the very high saving rate we've seen so far, I think there'll be a greater amount of consumer expenditure. And of course, from a personal perspective, as predominantly an oil and gas lawyer, I do hope that people buy more cars.
Even if it's electric cars.
Well, obviously, we want them to be gas-powered cars, and so that we can see people using hydrocarbons and underpinning the giant parts of the economies of so many countries, not least Nigeria's, of course, but also the UK's.
Yes, Will. Now that I have you, I mean, you as an international lawyer, you work with clients in different jurisdictions, right? I mean, if we can get into the minds of some of your clients, how they're responding to this, it may throw up some opportunities for us.
I think so, yes. I mean, one thing we're seeing a lot more of is greater involvement of multilateral lenders, development financed institutions, export credit agencies. We've been seeing a lot more RFPs from them in the last couple of months or so. And these are the sort of entities that are trying to get the world economy moving again, to stimulate things. And of course, they're not only providing funding or credit protection themselves, but when they do that, they allow commercial banks to come in. Commercial banks feel more comfortable doing transactions. So seeing a lot of opportunities there, a greater focus on the energy transition. So notwithstanding my comments about oil and gas, I do think that the energy transition is being accelerated by the current crisis. And so that's everything from greater use of renewables for energy generation. I think a greater emphasis on storage of power generated by renewables. The hydrogen economy is going to become a thing much sooner than it was going to. So strong opportunities there, and oil and gas companies, particularly the bigger players, given their project management skills and their very strong balance sheets, will be able to be a major part of this. I think that's a good opportunity for them to transition from oil and gas into the new energy economy, if you will. So big opportunities there.
Excellent, Will. Just one last thing. I mean, many companies going insolvent. I heard that Hertz, the car rental company, went insolvent a couple of days ago, and I'm sure we're going to see much more of that. So that would be a good market for insolvency lawyers in this period.
Yes, definitely. So I think to be an insolvency lawyer now is a very recession-proof sort of job to have, and certainly talking.
We should get into insolvency immediately.
Yeah, and,
unfortunately, insolvency is not a big deal in Nigeria. I mean, we don't have. That's not a strong culture. It's not something they do. As they do in the US. But I don't think the UK. I don't think the UK has. The Chapter 11 or whatever they call it, do they?
We don't have an equivalent of Chapter 11. The new insolvency bill that was published last week, and it's under discussion at the moment, does have a sort of Chapter 11 type structure in it. I haven't read the more than 260 pages of draft bill yet, but colleagues have and have raised eyebrows about the way the British insolvency system is being completely turned around by this. So it'll be interesting to see if this comes into law. But you're right, Aili, restructuring lawyers are going to be very busy over the next few years, but equally sector specialists, because I think you can know how to restructure a company, but you need to know the sector as well. So whether it's industrials or oil and gas or pharma or whatever it might be, there'll be a good opportunity to bring insolvency skills and sector skills together and allow companies to be restructured and hopefully to come back stronger and fitter than before.
Yeah, well, Will, I know we're talking about opportunities, so I have some bad news for you. I don't think that many people want to even drive electric cars. People are moving to bicycles. Chukwudi, show us something on bicycles.
Coming up now.
Yeah. So this what's coming up is a Dutch company, and they've made so much money in this period. They've been able to get venture capital to give them about 12 million or 12 billion euros in this period.
Technology, and we can improve commuter bikes so more people will start commuting.
Now that all starts with this, which is the Electrified S. It's the company's flagship bike. Now it's important to know this bike is a great way to get around a big city. It's economical, it's good for your health, but it's not without its hardships. If you have a long commute or a long way to go, you can leave yourself tired and sweaty, and you're always worried about your bike or parts of your bike being stolen. Those are problems that a Dutch company called Van Moof are trying to solve when these two bikes come to the United States this year.
We try to completely redevelop the bike. We think it's strange that in the world there are 10,000 engineers, approximately, I don't know, but approximately 10,000 engineers working to make racing bikes a little bit lighter, to make mountain bikes more sturdy, but only, I guess, 10 engineers are working to get better city bikes. And we think that with new technology, we can improve commuter bikes so more people will start commuting.
Now that all starts with this, which is the Electrified S. It's the company's flagship bike. Now, it's important to know this bike is electric assisted. That means you can't just power the electric motor. There's no throttle or anything. But what it does is it helps you as you pedal, which is nice on a small slope or steeper hills like we're heading up right now. Instead of being exhausted by the end of the ride up this hill, I'm actually going to feel really good because it just makes pedaling so much easier. And there are different power modes, so you can go from just a little bit of assist to a lot, and a lot makes it go really fast.
It assists up to 32 kilometers an hour, which is, I think, 21 miles per hour. If you want to go faster, you have to pedal. That is the level that it will assist you.
To the left there.
Amount of power the motor delivers is like 2, so you can have a little or a lot, and there's even a button underneath the handlebar that'll give you a bit of a boost if you want to go fast.
Okay, 32 kilometers per hour. What's the speed limit in Abu Dhabi? Okay. What's the speed limit in Nigeria? I'm not sure we have a speed limit. What's the speed limit in the UK? You don't know, you've been driving very fast.
That's what road you're on, but it has been 20 miles an hour in London, so yeah, cycling around is quicker than driving.
I mean, 32 kilometers per hour is not slow, it's not fast, but I mean, a lot of very careful drivers will drive at 32 kilometers per hour, right? People who are not in a hurry, right? And this bike can do up to 32 kilometers per hour, you know, and you know, they say that their sales between February to date, you know, and their orders grew exponentially. They couldn't meet their orders, and they got venture capital to give them, you know, millions of euros quickly, and they teamed up with some company in Taiwan, and you know, this may be the next mode of transportation in many cities around the world. Okay, what do you think?
What do I think? I haven't owned a car in 3 years. That's what I think. Sold my car 3 years ago, and I haven't owned one since then. And frankly, I don't feel the difference. I mean,
But you've been using Uber.
Well, I mean, there are options. There's Uber, there's, you know, the Uber version here, Kareem, and sort of you learn how to be a bit more sensible. You learn to buy one car, for instance, as a family. You know, you just, you know, these days, with telecommuting, you don't have to go anywhere. You can order in. So we tend to sort of live a far more efficient life, which calls for less carbon emissions.
Excellent. I think we have, Ada, are you back on?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay, good to have you back. Just before we come back, you give 1 minute to catch your breath. Audrey, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so you know, in the past we used to talk about workplace. And workplace was a place you go to. It's a workplace. You go to a place to work, right? You know, a lot is going to change. You know, are we going to have workplaces going forward? You know, how do you think the mode of working will change? What opportunities do you think it will throw up?
Right, so I think that the phrase workplace may not be used anymore, and this is why I say so, because workplace is increasingly becoming location irrelevant. For obvious reasons, virtual working is the next normal. So workplace will simply refer to whatever location an employee is working from. It may be replaced by phrases like workspace, workstation, work location. So when people ask me, for example, are you at work? I mean, currently Detail is working from home fully. So if you ask me, am I at work? I want to be sure my answer would be that I am at work because I am working, but I'm not in the traditional workplace as we have known it. So it can become confusing. Therefore, I believe that it might become more appropriate for people to start asking, where are you working from? Because workplace will not be the workplace that we knew it to be in the traditional sense. In terms of opportunities that this throws up, in my opinion, we will have a more flexible work environment across a lot of organizations. even organizations like manufacturing that can't fully work from home, you will still have some staff who are able to take up that new work culture.
Do you think that artificial intelligence and robotics will start moving more into manufacturing, and then people will then have to find other things to do remotely? You see that happening?
Yes, I believe so. One of the McKinsey research report that I read says about 60% businesses are saying that their remote channels are doing as well, about 31% as well as the traditional channels. So increasingly, we will see organizations deploying artificial intelligence, different work mode, different work processes will begin to happen because of this new workplace, as we call it. So yes, it's a definite yes for me.
Thanks, Olu. Ada?
Yes.
Welcome back. I don't know if you were on when we were talking about China, and then we were trying to say that China is very export driven, but in this season they may have a problem with exporting, which may then create new opportunities in countries they otherwise exported to, right? So I need to just take a look at Nigeria. What do you think we will start manufacturing to replace that vacuum that China may create if they don't export as much?
Yeah, just a few things. I kind of touched on it earlier. So many people are dependent on China for their retail businesses. But I look at sectors like textiles, cotton, and actually having our own factories that are processing our cotton into textiles and then sending it on to the manufacturers of clothes, and suddenly a thriving fashion industry emerges that's homegrown and that has its own local raw materials. So I think things like that it's one example. I just wonder, I guess it's across the board. This is really the time that innovation would come about, when we just don't have the means. And I if you kind of go back to what we talked about with low oil prices, so the budgets, there's no money in the government's coffers anymore. So you can't even access foreign exchange. So even if the markets are open, I wonder what will happen, because people can't even get the dollars to purchase anymore. So I think sectors, food will continue to do well. Textiles and other forms of manufacturing. I mentioned toothpicks earlier on. Just some of the minute things.
Yeah. So there's a gentleman whose name I forget right now that manufactures cars in Nigeria. Who can remind me?
Innoson Motors.
Innoson, right? So do you think that a guy like Innoson, obviously every car manufacturer gets different components from places like China, right? Even the Ford Motors and things, So do you think that people like Innoson will be able to start doing their components here, or they can enter into a synergy with someone to start manufacturing components for them? Or do you think that the Chinese will actually, because this is what they probably do, they'll probably come into different countries and start manufacturing on ground rather than
I don't know, it really depends. Again, innovation would push us to do a lot more than we typically wouldn't have done. But I think about when I talk about that local, looking inwards and the homegrown solutions, I typically focus on the sectors that are essential, food security, healthcare, those sorts of spaces are where I feel that we would be forced to look inwards and make things ourselves. But then I don't know about cars. Cars. It's not something that you can own a car. You don't have to own a car. Okay, So.
Yeah, but you're right about healthcare, Ada. In this period, we've seen Nigerians begin to make masks.
And masks, even up to respirators. You have our young engineers.
We've seen locally made masks. I think the only thing we're not making locally is test kits. But we've seen suits. We've seen masks. people have rigged up very quickly, and it's not going away, right? It's not going away. You know, I was saying to someone a few days ago that people will need shoe covers. In my home, there's protocol when you go out and you get home, you have to take your shoes off outside and put them in the sun. So people will need shoe covers. They will be made locally. There will be things around healthcare. You are absolutely right, Anna. I think this is an appropriate point for us to take questions. Chukwudi, are you there? Do we have any questions?
Yes, we have one question.
Excellent. That means we've done well.
Yes. Actually, two.
Two. Okay.
The first question is for Mr. Sakwe. So it says, do you think investors should be looking more towards agro investments? And how safe is it investing in agro products at the moment?
Oh, this is the time. Honestly, this is the time to do, apart from agro projects, other things. I think it was William saying earlier on that we will come back. The economy will recover. People will go out again. And that's my belief. So if you're one of, I wear my investor hat because we've done a few deals apart from Newly. We're invested in about 8 other startups. This is the time for opportunities, especially in places like agriculture where you know whether or not people would eat. So definitely, we are looking at, investors will be looking at this space.
Thank you. Next question.
The next question is also for Mr. Sakwe. This one just says, what would you say would be the changes that we should expect in the new world with respect to agro-allied practice, especially for lawyers? Should we see a lot of interest by lawyers in the agro-allied space?
Absolutely, and I think others can, maybe Ayedi can join me in answering this, but...
You can patch it too. And Nadas, you grow, make sure that you come and use detailed solicitors.
I know, and I was just about to say that because detailed solicitors, their interest in the agro space. You have to understand that agriculture is not just about the production end, it's also about the infrastructure, opening up markets, building factories, scaling up, and we need lawyers to do those contracts and think through all the different parts of the value chain. So I hope you've finally done something in the agro and food space. But yes, lawyers should be there.
Will, do you want to add something to this?
I completely agree. I think that we're going to see ever more of this, driven by a couple of factors. First of all, the need for finance alone. Agri-businesses often operate on quite thin margins. I think finance is needed on a supply chain basis. But we're just going to need to see more investment generally. There's going to be a demand for funds. The nearshoring of production will apply to agriculture probably more than anything because of where the product is consumed. And I just hope that others don't face the challenges faced in the UK, where thanks to Brexit, we can't get people to come here and pick soft fruit. So we have raspberries and strawberries and things rotting in the fields at the moment, which is less good. Maybe an opportunity for somebody to come up with a robotic solution.
No, I'm coming to pick them for you, Will. How much will I get paid per hour? I can do that as a side hustle.
That William is talking about the fact that there is money and the investors waiting in there, but we're going through this time in Africa and Nigeria, and so many businesses are just like, where is the money? We go on all these websites that have grants supposedly to be helping businesses through this period, but no one can access it, or it's not really. So it's a bit sad, when you find that missing, that middle, right? There are funds, but they're not placing the funds. So how do we deal with that and make that connection? That's
where the opportunities come in. There are vacuums. I think what you're trying to say that
Vacuum.
There are vacuums that need to be filled. Yes, there would always be vacuums. Now, Chugudi, put on tech giants, please.
Come again. We lost you for a bit.
So I'm some of the tech in this period, right? So I mean, pots of money, just from being at the right place at the right time. It's just their time, right? Yeah. So this is a graph from Statista, right? And if you look on the extreme left there, you will see Amazon, right? And the dark blue is the results for Q1 2020, right? You know, and if you compare that, you know, with Q1 2019, you can see that they've gone up plus 26%, right? And all of them in that bracket, Apple, Facebook, even if they haven't gone up exponentially, they've not gone down, right? You know.
That's the important thing. Yes, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, what this is this is just one industry, but I think the point we're trying to make here is that, you know, there are opportunities, and there will be several industries who will be doing well in this period. Okay, if you were to put money in an investment, these are the kind of companies we should be investing in right now.
No.
Okay, has a lot of money there. He doesn't want us to share with him.
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Tell us, say no.
No, I'm sorry to disappoint. I mean, listen, you know, it depends on what your objectives are. I mean, tech has always been a speculative sector, but I think even in the last few weeks and months, it's even gotten more speculative because of the uncertainty. So when there is uncertainty, you know, capital tends to sometimes lose its head or go into hiding. So what you're seeing is sort of a bipolar reaction of the markets, where a lot of money has gone to safety, meaning cash and treasuries. And then the others have just gone off the deep end and basically chasing this speculative investments in technology. So just from a rational, fundamental investment standpoint, this is probably not a good time for you to be chasing tech stocks.
Unless your risk appetite is high. You know, you guys have this thing about risk appetite, right? You know, high risk appetite, you know.
Well, look, I mean, it's all about risk-adjusted return, right? I mean, are you a gambler? Are you an investor? You have to define what you are. So, I mean, if you're a gambler, listen, you know, buy me a ticket, we go to Vegas and we have double the fun. But if you're an investor, then I think you have to sort of take a much more measured and reasoned approach.
Thanks, okay. I think we have 2 minutes more because we want to close at exactly 12 if we're not at 12 already. But I'd just like to take last words from everybody. Beginning with you, Will. Just, you know, sorry. Just a last word for everybody. Will?
I think it's a great chance to get closer to one's clients. The engagement we're all having now is on a much more personal level than it tended to be before. You know, you see children running around in the back of Skype calls. You have those more personal conversations with clients. And I think while overall business may decrease a little bit for the immediate future, it'll be a better quality of business that we all do with a better quality of relationship. Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Hi, Will. For Martin, who was not able to join, he just sent in a last-minute question to you.
Okay, let's take the last words first and see if we can accommodate that, please. Go on. Odu?
Oh, right. Okay. So I think for what we have found from this discussion is that people just need to stay positive and see the opportunities in this. So I guess it's for people to embrace the new normal, start rethinking, start reimagining. You know, we develop resilience and have deep resolve to survive this and make the best of it. So I believe that with this, the journey to survival and growth begins.
Excellent. Anna, are you there?
Yes,
I thought you were going off planting something quickly.
I'm right here. I've been a business, growing business in this economy. I really want other business owners to truly embrace technology in a way that they probably hadn't in the past. We have no choice now, but even in the simplest of things, interactions, in how you bank, in everything we do, we really have to be online to take advantage of all the opportunities that are emerging. So digitization is key, and I hope that businesses are really thinking through that.
Okay, so before we take the last words from Chukwudi, what's the question from Martin?
Okay, so the question from Martin is for Will. He's asking, Will, what do you think the current way of working has done for relationships between professional service providers and their clients?
I mean, to a degree, I touched on it.
I think Will just answered that. Go ahead, Will.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, two things. Firstly, like I said, I think it's made for a more personal relationship between clients and professional service providers, and that's a good thing that has come about from the crisis. I also think that responsiveness is going to be ever more important. You know, there's no excuse not to reply quickly to something because none of us is on a plane at the moment. We're not traveling. We're not commuting, so we can be even more responsive to clients. That said, I do emphasize my view that nothing is going to beat an in-person meeting, and the sooner we can be back on planes and back in meeting rooms with our clients, the better it's going to be for relationships.
I look forward to seeing you in Lagos soon. Okay, let's take your last words before we wrap this up.
Well, Ayuli, like you said, it's all about optimism and trying to remain optimistic in the face of what seems like a crisis. Listen, I mean, I call this creative destruction. So from the Western standpoint, right, we've gone through this large debt cycle or credit cycle where everything's just been sort of over leveraged. So I think we have to go through this period of destruction, and then obviously out of those ashes will rise opportunities to fill that output gap. So if you're an entrepreneur or a thinking person, and then there will be lots of opportunities to create new stuff or to take up positions that were, previously held by legacy players.
Thank you. Okay, I mean, I pick up two words there: entrepreneur and thinking person. I just think that in this period, we should all just put on those two hats at the same time: entrepreneurial hat and be a thinking person. We should stop looking at the curves and the bad news and the statistics of who's dying, and we should start looking at some of these graphs. Who's making money in this period? Where can I plug in? Who needs something in this period because of all that is going on? How can I fill that vacuum? I think there are many opportunities out there, and I think what we've done in the last 1 hour is just, throw up some of them, but I think these are a drop in the ocean compared to what's out there. And I think we should all just go out there and, like Pete, we should have great expectations. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you all for your contributions, Will, Ada, and Martin, who wasn't able to join. And I think this is a good place to wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.